All right, let's take a look at this question, which I think was question A in our practice this morning. And again, I'll go over the answer. I'll give you a point a couple of minutes in, maybe a minute or two in, where you can maybe stop and try it yourself and then come back and look at my answer. Um, but I'll have a final answer for you at the end if you watch the entire thing. But let's go ahead and get started. Um, Again, my typical thing to do with these types of questions is to initially create a place for all of my variables to exist. So I'm going to go ahead and this is sort of what I was trying to artificially make you all do with creating a table. Um, but, you know, if you did it a different way, that's perfectly fine. Sorry, let's readjust this a little bit. But I'm going to create a couple variables here. I'm just going to do an initial scan and see what variables I have and create them a little bit over here at the bottom. So I'm going to start with maxnum, type A, type B, type C, and K. Actually, we'll get to K in a second. Well, that's a little bit different. But those are variables that exist outside of any loops. They just exist outwardly. And let me take a look at what the question is. I have it over here. What is printed out when maxnum is 50? Okay. So I initially already know from the question maxnum equals 50. So that's good to know. So I can go ahead and get started. So we've already essentially done this first part of the code because we set A, B, and C now to 0. And we'll be moving from there. Now we can jump straight to this loop, which is the bulk of what we're going to be doing. So we can see that K is starting at 1. I'm going to create K over here. K equals 1. We're going up to and including 50. Which if you sort of piece that together in your head, how many times is that looping? It's actually going to loop 50 times. And so we'll be going from 1 to 50, including 50. Come in handy a little bit later, just good for you to know. K++, it's just going to be looping as normal. We'll go from there. And now we have our set of if statements here. The first thing I want you to notice is that none of these if statements have curly braces, which means that each if statement is separate of each other. So we're going to have to check each of them and increment and all of them separately. It's not like one is inside of the other. So like you don't check K mod 2 if K mod 2 and K mod 5 is true. They're all separate of each other. Because if we have an if statement with no curly braces, the only thing inside of the if statement is the immediate line right after it. So like that is for the first if statement, this one's for the second one, and this one's for the third one. But anyway, I digress. Let's go ahead and get started with looking at this first if statement here. And it's saying if K mod 2 equals 0 and K mod 5 equals 0, increment A by 1. And just to remind you again, mod is our operator that figures out if we have a remainder from dividing. So for example, K mod something, if it equals 0, that means that we're essentially asking, is K divisible by whatever number? So for example here, if we look at the first one, K mod 2 equals 0. K mod 2, is K divisible by 2? And we're going to look at that one first with 1, K being 1. But I'm also going to look at this. I also have K mod 5. So same thing here, is K divisible by 5? So let's take a look at our first look at this. So K equals 1. So is 1 divisible by 2? And is 1 divisible by 5? And so we can initially see 1 is not divisible by 2, and 1 is not divisible by 5. So that means we're not going to go inside of that if statement, so we're going to keep type A the way it is. Now we move on to the second if statement here. Let me see if I can actually make this a little nicer. Sorry, this is giving me some issues. Can't find the eraser. There we go. All right, the eraser. I'm just going to erase this and click on my black pen again. So this is the first if statement. And then we have our second if statement. And then we have our third if statement. And again, our first if statement is asking if 1 is divisible by 2, and if 1 is divisible by 5. And then inside the second if statement, just to look at it, we're looking, is 1 divisible, divisible by 2,